Hello, I'm going to talk about the practice of colorimetry. The College of Optometrists in the United Kingdom has referred to a Delphi study, a recent Delphi study, in which a panel of experts selected a set of criteria for visual stress and its treatment with the colorimeter. The Delphi criteria are here, but before I consider those, I want to emphasize that the use of colorimetry is effectively a last resort. You check that the patient's eyes are healthy, there's no significant refractive error, there's no orthoptic anomaly, and only then can you consider the Delphi criteria, and if they are passed, consider colorimetry. These are the Delphi criteria. At least 3 of the following 6 typical symptoms: words moving on the page, words merging, patterns or shadows in the text, text seems to stand out in 3D above the page, words or letters fade or darken, and then there's discomfort from certain artificial lights and flicker. Those are the symptoms. We need 3 in order to pass the Delphi criteria, but we also need 2 of the following 3 signs. Now, I'm going to show you what those signs are in the future, in the slides that follow, but they are voluntary use of a coloured overlay for 3 months or more, and the overlay has to improve performance on the Wilkins rate of teaching test by more than 15%. And there's a pattern glare score of more than 3. Now I'm going to explain what those are. Coloured overlays are sheets of coloured plastic placed upon a page of text when reading. Here the patient's comparing 2 reading passages, each covered by a different overlay, and they're making a selection of the best colour by a process of elimination. You work down through a set of 10 overlays, keeping the best one in its place and changing the one that's not as good with another colour. Having found the best, you can check whether it helps with reading using this rate of reading test. It's extremely simple. It consists of text made up from randomly ordered common words. They're words that young children are familiar with, but they're in a random order. They mean nothing. So people are quite able to do the test when they're fairly young, and it can even be fun. But they have to see the words in order to read them. And we're not measuring the speed of comprehension because there's nothing to comprehend. So we measure how quickly, how many words they can read in a minute, and then compare that with when the text is covered by a coloured overlay. Sometimes the reading increases in speed. It has to increase in speed by at least 15% in order to pass the Delphi criteria. And if it does, then we can consider colorimetry. Another test is the pattern glare test. This consists of a series of patterns. You just look at the patterns and say what you see using a checklist. The checklist is up here. Colours, sometimes you see colours even though it's black and white. Bending of the lines, blurring of the lines, shimmer or flicker, fading, shadowy shapes or something else. And a score of more than 3 on this test with this particular pattern, it would pass the Delphi criteria. So if you have passed the Delphi criteria, then you can go on to the intuitive colorimeter. It's a box that illuminates text with coloured light in such a way that you can vary the hue, the saturation, and the brightness separately. Normally, we work with light at constant brightness and vary the hue and saturation at constant brightness. In this diagram, that consists of you can consider this as a diagram in which hue is at the angle from made with white light at the center, and the saturation is the distance from white. And what we do is to increase the saturation and then decrease it again to white, and then change the hue and increase the saturation and decrease it again to white. So the patient's eyes are adapted to white light in this first stage of colorimetry, comparing different hues. And then we, having found the best hue, we get the patient to adjust the saturation to its best level, and then we revise the hue a little bit, re-optimize it, and then re-optimize the saturation at the revised hue, and work through this cycle, alternately revising hue and saturation, effectively hill climbing to find the best chromaticity. Then we minimize the saturation because we want the weakest tint that suffices, and then we check the effects of the darkness of the lens, and we can obtain that using this spreadsheet. This spreadsheet will tell you how dark the lens is going to be in order to obtain that particular colour. In this case, the colours are bluey colour. The trial lenses are shown here. There are 5 differently coloured, different levels of deposition for each dye, and there are 7 different dyes: rose, orange, yellow, green, turquoise, blue, and purple. And with those dyes, and with 5 levels of deposition for each of those trial lenses, we can get any colour. We can do that because each tint has twice as much dye as the next level up, and half as much dye as the next level down. And by combining all the possible combinations of just 2 dyes, we can get any colour in this gamut here. And as you can see from the first 1,000 tints, sometimes patients do need the full gamut of colours. This system has now been shown, investigated briefly in a variety of neurological conditions, including photosensitive epilepsy, autism, migraine with order, cluster headache, visual stroke, and head injury. And these disorders and the results obtained using the system are described in this paper. Thank you.